The Holy Gospel according to St. Mark, the 7th chapter. Now, when the Pharisees and some of the scribes who had come from Jerusalem gathered around Jesus, they noticed that some of his disciples were eating with defiled hands, that is, without washing them. For the Pharisees and all the Jews do not eat unless they thoroughly wash their hands, thus observing the tradition of the elders. And they do not eat anything from the market unless they wash it. And there are also many other traditions that they observe, the washing of cups, pots, and bronze kettles. So the Pharisees and the scribes asked him, "Why do your disciples not live according to the tradition of the elders, but eat with defiled hands?" He said to them, "Isaiah prophesied rightly about you hypocrites. As it is written, 'The people honors me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. In vain do they worship me, teaching human precepts as doctrines. You abandon the commandment of God and hold to human tradition." Then he called to the crowd again and said to them, "Listen to me, all of you, and understand. There is nothing outside a person that by going in can defile. But the things that come out are what defile. For it is from within, from the human heart, that evil intentions come: fornication, theft, murder, adultery, avarice, wickedness, deceit, licentiousness, envy, slander, pride, folly. All these evil things come from within, and they defile a person." This is the word of the Lord. So today, we have moved from the 6th chapter of John, which we have been hearing from for the last 5-6 weeks, I can't remember, and now we have jumped back to Mark. Back to where we left off all the way in July. These last weeks, though, we had Jesus explaining how he is the bread of life. And this is meant to help us to put into better context all that Jesus is teaching in his ministry. Jesus spends his life pointing us to God and to relationship. And that is also true in today's gospel reading. So at pub night this week, a couple days ago, at my end of the table, we had a little discussion about rules. And it started out because we were talking about a cooking show. And it was brought up that a particular contestant on a particular show struggled to cook with alcohol because their religion does not allow alcohol consumption. And then they also struggled with a dish that had to have coffee because their religion does not allow caffeine consumption. So, of course, one of my first thoughts was, clearly, she was not Lutheran. I am all for everyone expressing their personal and religious beliefs in whatever way brings meaning into their lives and helps them connect with their soul, their community, and their Creator. But where I struggle is when these religious teachings are used to exclude or oppress or convey superiority. And that was kind of what, our conversation led to. Ironic that we have these readings on this particular Sunday. And when I was thinking about religious rules, it brought to mind a young Muslim woman who works in my office. We have had many chances to really share about our different faiths, our experiences and our beliefs, our traditions. She wears a hijab, and she prays at all times appointed for the day. And for her, it really, truly connects her to her community, to her family, to her own inner spirit, and of course, to God. But unfortunately, there are religious people out there of all different faith traditions, as well as non-religious people out there who are promoting certain social expectations who use their rules to control and exclude others instead of creating community. And this is really what Jesus is getting at when he is talking to the Pharisees and the scribes in these verses from Mark. So first, let me say that Jesus never was suggesting that we should ignore God's commandments or rituals and practices that strengthen community. What he was pointing out was that some of these extra rules that got added over the years actually subvert and undermine God's law and commandments. So the commandments, they aren't rules for the sake of rules. They are together as a code to help us respect each other, respect ourselves, and to live in community where we care for each other and keep God at our center. In Deuteronomy, we have Moses talking about the commandments, about how keeping the statutes will show others how good it is to follow the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. To be a light unto the nation, as Isaiah proclaims. But it is this sentence in Moses' speech, one that can be lost if not listening closely, that I think explains even more clearly. And Moses says, "For what other great nation has a God so near to us as the Lord our God is whenever we call on him?" The commandments are about relationship. They are about how to know that God is near and will be near and there when we call. The entire Torah, those first 5 books of the Bible, including the commandments, are created from the heart of God. But humans are human. And even after their time wandering through the desert and then moving into the land that God had promised, they fell short. They continued to want more specific structures that would make them feel safe. They asked for judges to help them with their disputes. Then they asked for kings to rule over them. And throughout this time, God sent prophets to try to guide them back to the basic principles of loving God and loving neighbors with all they have. And like we heard from James this morning, right? Religion that is pure and undefiled before God the Father is this: to care for orphans and widows in their distress, and to keep oneself unstained by the world, to care for others, to be in relationship with God. And throughout his ministry, Jesus worked really hard to help all who would listen understand that being the people of God meant being a family in God. And healthy and positive relationships do require boundaries and agreements, and yes, rules and expectations. So these boundaries, agreements, rules, and expectations are intended to strengthen relationships, not create barriers. They are meant to be guides for how to love and care for one another, not how to decide who we should love and who we should care for. The commandments were never about judgment. They were about justice. They were about relationships, about community. They are about living in a way that others would see it and want to learn more, want to be part of that relationship. And this is how we should all share our faith with others. We are at a point in the life of Christianity overall, as well as in the life of this congregation where it is difficult, where the loudest voices out there tend not to be the voices that share the same faith practices and ideals that we do. Too often, they are not voices that stress inclusion, community, or justice as God defines it, not as humans define it. God's love is in this space. God's Spirit is in this place. And as I get to know all of you a little better every time we gather for worship and for any kind of fellowship, I become even more convinced that God is calling us to do what we need to do to keep going forward in this city, sharing our love and our community with any and all, but especially with those who may not have true and complete acceptance anywhere else. And to me, that is what living out our lives as Christians means. To me, that is what was at the heart of all of our readings today. We are being asked, how do we let our light shine so that what we do points to God, who desires relationships and calls for justice? This is the question that we need to focus on as we move forward. And I know we are up to the challenge because it is God who is our foundation. And it is God who will see us through to whatever our next and current adventures are. Amen.